Jace didn't understand why no one came to his mom's funeral. He was only 5, standing in shoes a size too big, holding a wilted flower and waiting for someone, anyone, to kneel down and say they were sorry. But all he saw were folding chairs left empty and a father who didn't cry, just drank from a flask while mumbling to himself. After she died, Jace learned to be small, to not ask for snacks, to not speak when the TV was loud. Some nights, his father would lock the front door and leave him out on the porch, muttering things like, "You'll learn not to talk back," or "Sit there till you know how to be a man." He'd sit in the cold, clutching his knees, counting stars just to stay awake. One evening, the flashing lights came, blue and red dancing across the walls. A neighbor had called the police after hearing shouting and glass breaking. Jace stood barefoot by the screen door as officers wrestled his father to the ground. Words like assault, possession, and danger to a minor floated above him, too big to understand, but heavy all the same. A woman in a gray coat crouched beside him. "You have one living relative," she said softly. "Your uncle, Caleb." The name meant nothing to Jace, but something in her voice made it sound like a gamble. His heart sank. He remembered hearing that name. Not from bedtime stories, but from his father's angry slurs. "That freak Caleb thinks wearing makeup makes him special. He's not family. He's not even a man." Jace looked up at the social worker. "Does he know about me?" he whispered. She smiled. "He's on his way." The waiting room smelled like coffee and metal chairs. Jace sat hugging a backpack someone had packed for him, 2 shirts, a toothbrush, and his mother's old scarf. Then the door opened, and in walked a man wearing pastel blue, bright pink sneakers and carrying a stuffed dinosaur under one arm. He had a soft beard, warm brown eyes, and a voice like lullabies. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Heard you're into dinosaurs. Want to meet your new roommate?" Jace didn't move. He didn't smile. But his eyes followed the dinosaur as Caleb made it dance across the air, making silly voices and goofy roars. For the first time in days, Jace felt the fear in his chest loosen, just a little. Caleb knelt beside him, gently holding out a hand. "I'm not your dad," he said, "but I promise I'll never make you sleep on the porch." Jace blinked. Then he reached out and took the hand. "Who was the first person that made you feel safe? Share their name or just their story in the comments below. And if you believe that love is something we choose, not something we inherit, hit like, subscribe, and stay with Heart Stories. Here, every story is a step toward healing. Jace didn't know what home was supposed to feel like, but he was sure it didn't smell like cinnamon and lavender. Caleb's apartment wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, one of which had to be cleared out to make space for a bed small enough for a 5-year-old, but it was warm. The walls were filled with art, not anger. There were no shattered beer bottles, no broken doors, no holes punched in the drywall. Just plants, picture frames, and quiet music drifting through the air like something sacred. Caleb didn't ask Jace to call him anything. He didn't say, "I'm your guardian now," or "You have to love me." He just pointed to a drawer in the bathroom and said, "That one's yours. Pick a color for your toothbrush." Jace picked orange. The next day, Caleb taped a sticker of a dinosaur on it and said, "Now it's official." Jace had questions he didn't ask, like why Caleb had a photo of a man on the nightstand in the other room, or why there were 2 mugs always washed and set out, or why Caleb sometimes sat at the kitchen table long after dinner, staring into space, fingers tapping some invisible rhythm. Instead, Jace watched. He watched how Caleb made pancakes into animal shapes on Sundays, how he asked Jace if he wanted the nightlight on or off instead of just deciding, how he never raised his voice when Jace knocked over a glass or cried because of a nightmare. He just knelt down, handed him a soft towel, or opened his arms and waited until Jace crawled in. One night there was a thunderstorm, loud, sudden, splitting the sky like a scream. Jace woke up in a panic, heart racing. In the old house, this was when the worst happened, when his father would stumble through the hallways drunk and looking for something to break. Jace got up, blanket clutched like armor, and crept into the hallway. The apartment was dark, except for a warm glow from under Caleb's door. Jace hesitated, then knocked once. It opened instantly. Caleb didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't tease. He just stepped aside and said, "Want to sit with me?" They sat together in silence, Caleb on the floor, back against the bed. Jace curled into his side, blanket still clutched tight. The storm rumbled, but for the first time, Jace didn't flinch. He felt Caleb's heartbeat. Steady, strong, safe. The next morning, he woke up on the couch, tucked in. A sticky note on the coffee table read, "You snore like a baby dinosaur." Good thing I like dinosaurs. It became their thing. Dinosaurs. Caleb bought Jace a coloring book. Jace drew a T-Rex wearing sunglasses. Caleb framed it, but Jace still carried what he'd heard. Caleb is the wrong kind of man. He's not family. People like that don't raise kids. Those voices didn't vanish overnight. They lived in his skin, like old bruises. But each day, the silence in Caleb's world spoke louder than all of them. It told Jace he didn't have to explain himself, that he could just be, that he wasn't something to fix or quiet down. Caleb had a boyfriend too, Ethan. He came over twice a week, brought donuts, made silly jokes, wore graphic tees that said things like, "Bake the world a better place." He didn't try to be stepdad. He just knelt down the first time they met and said, "So, dinosaurs or dragons?" "Both," Jace whispered. "Excellent choice," Ethan nodded, completely serious. When Jace came home from school with a scraped knee, it was Ethan who brought the Band-Aid with tiny stars on it. When Jace's teacher asked for family photos for a classroom board, Caleb didn't flinch. He helped Jace pick one where all three of them were holding cotton candy at the fair. No one said it was weird. No one said it was wrong, at least not inside their home. But at school, it was different. The kids didn't know, and Jace wasn't sure he could explain. He didn't know how to say, "My real family doesn't look like yours." He didn't know if anyone would understand what it meant when Caleb asked for hugs instead of demanding obedience, or how Ethan knew exactly how to make his mashed potatoes creamy without lumps, or that the house smelled like cinnamon because it made Jace feel safe. He didn't know if the world would believe that two men could build something better than what he was born into. But he believed it. He believed it every time Caleb asked if he wanted bedtime stories with or without funny voices. Every time Ethan let him lick the spoon after baking. Every time Caleb looked at him like he wasn't broken, but just beginning. And for a kid who had once been told he was a mistake, that belief felt like the first real thing in the world. It started as a game. Rain tapped against the window like a soft drum, the kind that made the living room feel too small for the energy in Jace's legs. Caleb was in the kitchen making soup, and Ethan had gone out to buy more tea. Jace had already built a blanket for it, drawn 3 dinosaurs, and lined up all his socks by color. So when Caleb said, "Go find a good hiding spot," Jace didn't think twice. He ran through the hallway giggling, skipping the obvious places. Under the bed, too easy. Behind the shower curtain, too loud. He opened the closet door in Caleb's room. Inside was more than clothes. There were things Jace had never seen before. A purple sequin dress, glittering even in the dim light. A tall pair of heels, red and bold. A makeup case labeled in black marker. Backstage essentials. And on the top shelf, a wig stand with a head full of soft, styled brown hair. It stared back at him like a secret. Jace reached up and touched the wig. It was smooth, almost like his mom's hair used to be. Then suddenly he heard Caleb's voice behind him. "That used to be my favorite," Caleb said quietly. Jace spun around, heart pounding. He expected anger, expected Caleb to grab his hand, slam the door, say something like his father used to. "Boys don't touch that." But Caleb just stood there, soup spoon in hand, eyes gentle. "You wore this?" Jace asked. Caleb nodded. "I used to perform in a club before you were born. My name was Callie Lux. Sounds silly now, huh?" "No," Jace said, still holding the wig. "It sounds like a superhero." Caleb laughed. Not the loud laugh he used when Ethan told a joke, but the kind that sounded like remembering. He walked over, sat on the edge of the bed, and patted the space beside him. Jace sat down. "My dad, your grandpa didn't like it. Not the dresses, not the dancing, not the idea that his son liked boys. I came out when I was 18, got kicked out that same night. Haven't been back since." "Is that why my dad doesn't talk to you?" Jace asked. Caleb hesitated, then he nodded. "He said I was a disgrace, that I didn't belong in the family anymore." Jace was quiet. He looked at the closet, then at Caleb, then down at his own hands. But you still took me in. Caleb's voice softened even more. Because you're not your father, and I'm not his shame. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain still tapping outside. Jace leaned against Caleb's shoulder. Do you miss performing? Sometimes when the music hits just right, when I smell hairspray, Caleb chuckled. But I don't need a stage to feel proud anymore. I have you. Jace stood up and walked back to the closet. He picked up the dress carefully, as if it were something sacred. Can I draw you in this? Caleb looked surprised, then nodded. I'd like that. That night, Jace drew a picture. Caleb in the purple sequin dress, standing in a spotlight. There was a crowd of stick figures, smiling and clapping. On top of the paper, in green crayon, Jace wrote, "You're still family to me." When he handed it to Caleb, the man didn't speak for a long time. He just pulled Jace into a hug that said everything. And for Jace, who had once learned to be afraid of softness, that hug was louder than thunder. That night, they didn't read a bedtime story. Instead, they lay on the couch watching old clips of drag shows on Caleb's tablet. Caleb pointed out outfits, explained makeup tricks, shared stories about friends with names like Vicky Voltage and Siren Rose. Jace giggled at the dance moves and asked if Caleb ever fell in heels. Once, Caleb grinned. Flat on my face, the crowd loved it. Jace laughed so hard he spilled his juice. Later, just before bed, he asked a quiet question. Will people at school think I'm weird? Because I live with you? Caleb didn't answer right away. He knelt down, looked him in the eye. They might, some of them, but that doesn't make them right. What matters is what you know. And you know what love looks like. Jace nodded, because he did. Jace had never thought about what other people might say. He was 8 after all. His world was made of cereal boxes and storybooks, not rules about what family should look like. He loved his home. It was small, warm, and smelled like cinnamon on Sundays. Caleb and Ethan taught him how to plant tomatoes, how to fold fitted sheets, and how to pick songs for road trips. At night, they tucked him in with silly voices and light kisses on his forehead. He didn't know this kind of love was something the world would question. Not until Monday morning. It started with a whisper at recess. Jace was trading Pokemon cards when a kid named Brendan asked, "Is it true your dad's gay?" Jace blinked. "I have 2 dads," he answered. "One's my uncle, the other is Ethan." Brendan made a face. "That's gross. You're not supposed to have 2. By lunch, the whisper had grown legs. A girl in his math group said her mom called it inappropriate. Someone else whispered that Jace was adopted by those kinds of people. Jace didn't know what that meant, but he didn't like the way they said it. The worst came when a 6th grader passed him in the hall and hissed, "Your whole house is fake." Jace ate his lunch quickly and alone. That night, he didn't say much. Caleb noticed right away. "Hey, kiddo," he said, kneeling next to the couch. "You've barely touched your dinner." Jace poked at the pasta. "Some kids at school said I don't have a real family." He didn't cry. He didn't even look up. Caleb didn't rush to respond. He sat down beside Jace and placed a hand gently on his back. "You know, when I was your age, someone told me that if I acted too soft, no one would ever love me, that I wouldn't belong anywhere." He paused. They were wrong, because one day I built a life full of love, one that's realer than any picture in a magazine. Jace turned to him, brows furrowed. "But how do I explain that to kids who won't listen?" Caleb gave a small smile. "Maybe you don't explain. Maybe you show them." The next day after school, Jace sat at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and a box of colored pencils. He didn't ask for help. He drew a house with a red roof and 3 stick figures, one with glasses, one with a beard, and one holding a small dinosaur plush. Above it, he colored a rainbow. Underneath, he wrote in capital letters, "My family loves loud." And when he finished, he didn't show it to Caleb or Ethan. He folded it carefully, slid it into his backpack, and walked to school the next morning like it was any other day. But when he got to his classroom, he went straight to his locker, opened it wide, and taped the picture to the inside of the door. Then, with a deep breath, he turned the locker so that it stayed open all day. It didn't make the whispers stop. But they changed. Some kids stared. One boy snorted. A few rolled their eyes. But one girl came up during art period and asked quietly, "Did you really draw that?" Jace nodded. She hesitated, then added, "It's kind of pretty." That was enough. That afternoon, Jace told Caleb about the picture. Caleb didn't say anything at first, just reached for the drawer and pulled out a magnet. "Let's hang it on the fridge too," he said. "So every time you open the door, you remember who you are and where you belong." That night, Ethan came home and saw the picture on the fridge. He didn't ask for the story, he simply kissed Jace's forehead and said, "Thank you for being brave." Jace was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Do you think my real mom would be proud?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "She'd be proud of the way you speak up. She'd be proud of the way you love. And she'd be proud you chose to tell your truth, even when it was hard." And so Jace, the boy some kids called fake, stood a little taller. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. Jace was 10 when he opened the wrong drawer. He was looking for a USB stick to save his class project, a stop-motion short film he'd made about dinosaurs going to space, when he found one already plugged into the old laptop in Caleb's home office. It wasn't labeled, just a black plastic drive wedged into the port. He clicked without thinking. What came on screen wasn't his animation. It was grainy, low-quality footage. The timestamp showed it was from over 15 years ago. The scene, a dimly lit living room. A younger Caleb, barely 18, stood near the front door, a duffel bag at his feet. Off-screen, someone shouted, the voice unmistakable. It was Jace's father. "You come back here with lipstick and lies and think I'll just let you stay?" Caleb's voice wavered. "I don't want to fight." A thud, a blur. The camera, hidden between books on a shelf, barely caught the movement. A shove. Then another voice, harsher and colder. Their grandfather. "You're not one of us anymore." Caleb stumbled back, face pale, holding his ribs. "I'm still your son." "No," the father spat. "You're not. You're just a disease." Then came silence. The clip cut. Jace stared at the screen. The boy in the video was his uncle. No, his father in all the ways that mattered. And the men yelling, pushing, banishing, they were his blood. He closed the file, hands trembling. He didn't cry. Not then. That night, Jace knocked on Caleb's bedroom door, the USB clutched in his palm. Caleb looked up from his book and saw Jace's face. No words were needed. He knew. "Why?" Jace asked, voice small. "Why did you still take me in after all that?" Caleb sat in silence. He didn't rush the answer. "Because I knew what it felt like to be cast out," he said softly. "I knew what it was like to hear someone say you don't belong, and to almost believe them. And I promised myself, if I ever had the chance to give someone what I never got, I'd take it. You weren't a burden, Jace. You were the chance to rewrite the story." Jace walked over slowly, climbed onto the bed, and leaned into Caleb's chest. "I don't want to rewrite it," he whispered. "I want to start a new one." Caleb kissed the top of his head. "Then let's do that. Together." From that night on, Jace never called him uncle again. At school, he filled out forms and listed Caleb as father. When people asked, he said it plain, "My dad's name is Caleb. That's all you need to know." Years later, when Jace gave his 8th grade graduation speech, he mentioned no names, just one line that made Caleb cry in the second row. "Family isn't what you're born into. It's who fights for your heart and never lets go." On their living room wall, there were now 3 photos in matching frames. One of Jace's first day of kindergarten, hand in hand with Ethan. One of Caleb on stage at a local LGBTQ+ fundraiser, proudly speaking about chosen families. And the third, a photo Jace had taken himself, now his passion, showed their backyard treehouse, lit by string lights, with a hand-painted sign nailed to the railing. "We are not who left. We are who stayed." What moment made you feel like you finally belonged? If this story moved you, share it. Comment below and let someone know. Ominiano, love can rewrite anything. Subscribe to Heart Stories, because here we honor the families we choose.